Hello and welcome to today's webinar on PotterNet and IntelliView. We thank you for attending, and we're lucky today in that Bob Tata, our Director of Software Services, will be conducting this webinar. Bob and his team developed PotterNet and IntelliView, so he has great insight into the features and functions. My name is Steve Huff, and I'm the manager of our training group for the fire systems, and I'll be managing the chat box. All attendees are muted, so if you have any questions during the presentation, please enter those in that chat box, and I'll answer those the best I can. If there's any that we think need to be answered by Bob, we'll get those toward the middle and end of this presentation. So with that, Bob, please take it away.
All right, thank you, Steve. I assume you can hear me okay. What I'm going to do today is the first part. I think we're scheduled for 2 hours. I'm going to commit to you. I'm not going to take your entire 2 hours, and I'm also going to commit that we're not going to just make this a big PowerPoint. We're going to look at some product and show you how it works. But I do want to give you some background on what these products do. So before we start clicking around software, you just have some idea of what these products are. So the first half will be PotterNet and some of our Modbus and BACnet interfaces. And then towards the end, we're going to look at IntelliView and some of our cloud services. And some of those capabilities are actually built into our PotterNet, or they could be installed separately. So let's just get started here. All right. Advance this slide here. All right, there we go. So, so for PotterNet, that is, if you're familiar with PotterNet at all, it's or products like this, it is our graphical head end, and this is a product that you're typically going to install in a monitoring area where you might have your security personnel, or in a lot of cases, if you're on university campuses, always come to mind for me, or large government facilities where they're already monitoring. It might be HVAC and building management systems, card access systems, CCTV systems, but their entire security usually has some central location or locations on a campus, and that's typically where you would also see the PotterNet, and the PotterNet would be doing the monitoring and control potentially of all of the fire systems across the campus. And the campus, when I say campus, I'm including a contiguous campus, or it could be a non-contiguous campus, meaning there might be satellite campuses in the same city, in the same state, maybe even across the country. PotterNet has the capability to do all levels of monitoring across an entire facility. So that's what when you're thinking of the PotterNet, be thinking of that. And I have another drawing to kind of drive that home. But let me move on to the next slide here. So basically, what the capacity of this is, it's pretty large. We could do over 1,000 fire panels, well over 300,000 points. And on any given system, you can have 15 PotterNet stations, meaning, and that kind of comes into the discussion I just said a little bit ago, where I said you can monitor a contiguous site or even a non-contiguous site. So you could break this system up so that you might have a PotterNet station at the main facility. You could have another PotterNet at a satellite campus, and you could even have one in the maintenance area. And they all can be configured the same, or they can be configured differently for different functions. Maybe the maintenance people only want to see troubles in the system. They don't really want to see, alarms. And those kinds of things. So we have those capabilities. But the nice thing about the PotterNet stations is that they do all stay in sync with each other, meaning any changes you make to our graphics or all of our settings, we replicate that across all of them when you save it. So there's no having to worry about, are all the systems up to date? They keep themselves up to date. If they see changes, they automatically synchronize. And then we support all of our addressable panels, the IPA series, as well as our over-the-counter AFC series panels. our conventional 4064, and then you see a note about doing BACnet IP. We do have the capabilities to monitor via BACnet, meaning that if you have a panel out there that is not a Potter panel, but it does have a BACnet IP interface, we can monitor that also. So here's another good picture of where I'm trying to get you to before we do a demo. Is this would be just kind of a typical looking system in my mind, which would be, you have a campus, and I already didn't mention this, but our panels all come with Ethernet. If you're familiar with our panels, they all have an Ethernet port in them, so they all are ready to be networked. So there's no additional cards or anything that need to be added to them. You just need to get the panels on either a shared network, a dedicated network, a VPN. Basically what we're looking for is IP connectivity between the PotterNet and each of the panels. And so each of the panels get a fixed IP address, essentially, and a user code, and the PotterNets can connect to all of the panels. So then we monitor across the shared IP network on that campus. And then in addition, I'll touch on some of these things here in the next slide or two, and even in the demo. We also have the capability from our PotterNet to do live and recorded audio paging, and that could be to our own paging systems or to somebody else's paging system, and I'll explain that in a second how we do that. And then I had mentioned where we can integrate to other people's fire panels. So if you get on a campus and there are some legacy panels, but they do have the capability to communicate over BACnet, we do have the capability to monitor other panels via BACnet. And then, as I said, I'm going to cover IntelliView in more detail later in the webinar. But you'll see in the upper left corner here the IntelliView app. IntelliView, just to give you a high level, IntelliView is built into PotterNet. So if you buy a PotterNet, you do get IntelliView, meaning, and when I say IntelliView, think of a mobile app for the moment. It also works on a browser, but think of having mobile app capabilities so that not only are you getting events in your PotterNet, but you're also getting events in your mobile device. And we'll dive into that later, but it does come with PotterNet, and it can also be sold separately. So if you didn't want PotterNet, but you did want the IntelliView capabilities, that's something you can do also. And we'll keep diving into that as we go through the webinar. Here's the audio paging. Again, I'll show more in the this user interface in the demo, but essentially how we do that is we do all the audio over the same IP network that I showed in the previous slide. And then we use a third-party device from CyberData. It's called a SIP paging adapter, and the exact model for that is in our manual. But anyway, the SIP paging adapter allows us to send digital audio to them over IP, and then we get a low-level analog output from each of those CyberData devices, and then we go into the analog input in the audio system that we're interfacing to. And then we can individually page to those. So if you wanted to page, say, to the top system there, you can just page to that one, or you can page to the one on the bottom, or you can page to both of them. And that's kind of what our user interface allows you to do, and I'll show you that. But essentially, you can check off which in each of these, like it says South Campus, really what that would end up being is one of these SIP paging adapters called the South Campus, and you could page to it, or you could page to multiples, whatever you want to do. And again, we have it'll handle live audio as well as some canned audio that we provide to you, or you can create your own canned audio so that you can send out pages when there's an emergency, or just want to send out a message to personnel. Here's a few things about what we've done in the last year. Some of it's mostly up to date, but just to let you know, this is a product that we continue to develop. We have many features in it right now. We have many more features that we see coming, and generally what you'll see from us in a given year is anywhere from I'd say 2 to 4 releases a year. It just really depends. Sometimes the releases are for new features that we're adding to PotterNet, and sometimes they're for compatibility. So as you know, we came out with a new voice system recently. So PotterNet, there were a couple new features in there, but one of the major things was to make sure that PotterNet and IntelliView and all of our products were compatible with the new voice system. So there's many reasons we put out releases in a year, but we always try to add some new features. And we've been spending a lot more time, I'd say, in the last year to two with our services and capabilities in the cloud, as well as some of the PotterNet features. And then from an application standpoint, this is just what we see when it's being sold. This is where we see it being sold into, and we think they're great applications. Definitely colleges and universities. It's just that's just the number one by far, the best place for this. We see a lot of large campuses that have many fire panels, across their campuses, and they typically do have a non-contiguous situation where even if it kind of is a contiguous campus, it seems like there's always another building somewhere else where they need to get access to and be able to monitor. So that's just a great one. Military, we have several military sites that we've got the PotterNet on. Probably within the last year or so, there was a fairly large amusement park, hospitals, industrial campuses, anywhere there's multiple panels, and they're starting to have trouble managing all of them and knowing which ones are in trouble and which ones are not, and they just want a general interface so that they can understand what's going on their campus. And usually these places have some level of a dispatch center that is monitoring. Like I said earlier, they're already monitoring CCTV and access control and a number of other things there, and so it's a natural for them to have a fire monitoring there. And without diving too deep into all of our part numbering and all that, there are many different versions of PotterNet, essentially 5 though. The top 3 are the ones that you would be selling to your customers. So there's a PotterNet UL, so there's a UL listed version of PotterNet. And when we say UL listed, what that means is it comes with the computer, the monitor, keyboard, mouse, the whole 9 yards. And we have an option for a touchscreen. So it is fully UL listed for monitoring of our fire system. And then there's PotterNet, and that all the software I'm talking about is all exactly the same software. So we don't do anything really different in PotterNet UL than we do in PotterNet. But in PotterNet, that is when we sell you the software only, and you provide the hardware. So now this is not a UL listed system. You might have your AHJ approve the use of PotterNet on your system, but it is not UL listed, meaning we're giving you the software, and again, it's exactly the same software that's used in PotterNet UL. It's just that you're going to be loading it on your own computer, which essentially is we need a Windows 10 or a Windows 11 computer, and generally the requirements for it are not very heavy, so it's nothing special in terms of hardware. We've even got people running them on virtual machines on servers, but that's what the PotterNet is. And then PotterNet Lite is a kind of a special of PotterNet where it's a single panel interface. So if you have one panel and you want a PotterNet on it, PotterNet Lite's perfect because that's exactly what it does. It's only made for monitoring one panel, and in that case, we only allow you to have one client. So it's one client monitoring one panel. Again, exactly the same software. It's just been kind of modified to just do the one panel connection. But the nice thing about that is if that's where you're starting, and it's got a nice lower cost too, I'd say, than the PotterNet and certainly the PotterNet UL. But the nice thing about PotterNet Lite is if you do get to the point where you say, well, we're going to add another panel, it's fine because it's really just a licensing thing. So if you said we need to move from PotterNet Lite to PotterNet because we're adding another panel, it's really just a license upgrade. And so there's really no, in the way we did the pricing, there's really no penalty for starting at PotterNet Lite. Like we're going to charge you extra now to move to PotterNet. It's really just a differential in price to get you to PotterNet. So nice way to start is with PotterNet Lite and get people used to it. So those are essentially the 3 products. And then down the bottom, PotterNet Demo Mode and PotterNet Dealer Only Mode are 2 free versions of PotterNet. The demo mode is really nice, and it's similar to what I'll be showing you in the demo today. It's nice because when we give you PotterNet demo mode, you load it on your computer, and it's got graphics built in, and it's got like a fire panel simulator built in, which are basically little buttons so that you can make the system go into fire alarm or a supervisory or a trouble, and you'll see the graphics move, and you can start playing with the software, and you can even go in there and play with our configuration. But it's a nice way to not have to, spend a whole lot of time, and you could be showing a customer, load it on your computer, showing it to a customer within, 10, 15 minutes. So just a really good way to get it out for yourself and to get it out to a customer so they can get an idea of what this software is and they can drive it a little bit. And dealer only mode is basically PotterNet that's got all the capabilities built in, and it's made for you to have in your office. Now, it doesn't come with graphics built in and stuff. It's made for you to put in your office, and maybe you have a demo room. You want to bring customers in and show them PotterNet. It will connect to panels, as many panels as you want to, and it's got all the features and functions. It says PotterNet dealer only mode across the top of it because we don't want it going to sites, but we do want you to have the capability to have it in your office. The other thing it's good for is that if you did install a PotterNet at a site, you could be doing configuration in your office, save your database, and then bring it to the site. You still could make edits at the site, but it's nice that you can actually do some of the core programming in your office. So those are the different versions that we have. So let me go over to a demo. All right. So let me get this out of here. All right. So this is the PotterNet. Actually, there you're going to see this this missing because I want to show you paging, but I actually don't have a paging one of those cyber data adapters connected to my computer at the moment, and that's why it's showing a trouble because it can't find it. But it still allows me to do the demo. So, but this is the basic PotterNet. Over on the right-hand side being the active signals pane. On the left-hand side being your graphics. There's a number of other screens and windows you could bring up, but this is the basics of what you would see on a day-to-day basis, and we'll dig into some of the other features. And then down the bottom, an alarm summary of everything that's going on in the system. Across the middle is really your highest priority event. And then over to the right are really just some, being able to log in is who you're logged in. I'm an admin at the moment, but I could, switch users or what have you. Time and date and just the product name. So I think the best thing to do here is really just to send an event in, and it'll get a little noisy on my end, so I probably won't talk a lot, but I'll be sending a number of events in, and you can look on the right-hand side. You'll be seeing events coming in and kind of stay in a prioritized manner. And then on the left, you'll be seeing the screen switching to the highest priority event. So let me do that and then let you just kind of watch it because I really do think that's the best way to do this. So here we go. All right, so I did send in a number of events. Actually, the 3 that actually had graphics associated with them were actually all on the same screen, but I'll show you how we change that. I want you to see where the configuration is and how relatively easy it is to do this configuration. But the nice thing about this is it does bring everything in a prioritized way. You'll see that when an event is unacknowledged, it's blinking. The red is blinking or the color is blinking, and then the highest priority event had those arrows pointing at it. So when like the fire alarm was the last one that I brought in, it was the highest priority at that moment, and so it's pointing at that one. And also down the bottom, if you had noticed, it continues to change. And the unacknowledged highest priority event is also, this is actually was blinking a bit too, to just to kind of highlight it that this is something that needs to be dealt with. In addition, your computer is also going to have an audio. So, there's a number of things happening to get your attention. that you have off normal events that need to be dealt with. So the other thing you saw is I can, with my mouse, I can zoom in on any point. I can zoom out, so we can handle virtually any size graphic that you can import. And when you do an import, we can take a number of different formats, including JPEGs and PNGs. But what we really prefer, and you'll prefer, would be a DXF file. And DXF files are generally exports from your AutoCAD, and they just have better clarity, so that when you zoom in on them, you don't get any pixelation, and you get a nice sharp graphic. But there's some graphics in here that I'll even be doing that show that it's that you'll see that are not DXFs, and they can get a little blurry as you move in. But anyway, each of the devices you see, I can click on the device. You saw I did that. If we turn on control in the licensing, and that is an option when you buy it from us, and it's not a paid option, it's just an option where we ask you to sign a waiver form, particularly on our non-UL versions, that we are enabling control of the panel from PotterNet, and letting you know that and you acknowledging that this is not a UL listed system, and it's not listed for control. But we will turn that on for you with that form, and we ask your customer to also sign off on that. But anyway, we do have the capability to control, so we can silence, reset, drill, enable and disable points. So that's basically the panel control things. Create history item is really just for just that. If you have a point like this, everything's going to history, so you know what's going on in the system, and you can always go back and look at what that transpired on a particular device. So that's automatic. But you can also create a history item. So because sometimes things happen outside the system, and you want to document those things. So we have a create history item, and I can say, sent, personnel to investigate. And all this really does is document that, put it in your history. And we have different history reports that you can print, but at least if there's ever kind of a post-mortem on an event that has happened on campus, you can have these things in there and let you know these are the things that we did or you did when there was an alarm. So that's a fairly new feature and something that was requested from us. The other thing you'll see down the bottom here is we kind of, and I'll be showing how that's configured, we have a entire hierarchy of screens that I've set up, and it's pretty easy to set up, but kind of had my site map here, which usually might be the name of the company or what have you. But then I can have kind of a campus map, and on the campus map you can get these areas to be highlighted, so that and I'll show you how you do that because I don't have them highlighted right now, but you can make them so they hyperlink to the particular building you're going to, and then you can just click on this. Here's a building that is not a DXF, but I just imported just to show it. And this is the one we've been dealing with, this Potterville second floor. So there's also a way to keep that up. I can pin that up, and then you can have your entire floor plan shown here. And in this case, I just have a couple. I have the site level. I have a campus map. I have some building, and I'll play around with this in the configuration so you can see what you can do with that. And then I just have a floor plan right now. So pretty simple right now. This can get very long depending on how many screens that you make. But like I said, even in this area, these floor plans, and obviously this one's fairly small for say a commercial building. We can get very large files in here. So you'll see as I zoom out, we could be putting a massive floor plan in here, and we have customers that do that. So it's really up to you how much you want to break up your system, or just create monster floor plans with hundreds of devices on the screen. All of that's fine. I'm going to shrink that for the moment. And then a couple of other things. We do have this whole system is tabbed, and I've opened these tabs, and I'll show you how this is done. But there's also a system view, which is essentially a read status. So you could do a read status on any point in the system. So this is this University of Potterville PotterNet, and we have just one Fire panel connected right now, so small system, and it shows you all of the devices on that panel, all of the loops. This is a fully loaded panel, and it's actually this third floor one down the bottom here that I've been bringing events in on, so I can click on third floor, and actually I could open that up, and I think it's the conference room. Yeah, conference room is the one with the fire alarm. But I could do a read status on that device and see how that point is programmed, and also get any data from it. So all of your obscuration data on that, if this happens to be a photo device, you can see all the sensitivity settings and drift settings. So anyway, you can get a real good view of what's going on in any of these devices. As I mentioned earlier, paging. This is the paging screen, and I can just do an all call to all of the devices that I have connected up, or I could do just maybe to the East Campus, or if I had West Campus, I could click that. And right now it's set for live page, but you can have different paging messages that you will program in. I'll show you where that's done. We just happen to send it with these, but you can have an evacuate message, and then you really just hit press to begin paging, and it'll start paging out to all those devices. And any one of these tabs too, we can work on multiple monitors and multiple screens. Any of these tabs can be moved. So you might say, well, I want the paging up all the time while the drawings are up. So I can move the paging, let's just say beneath the events. So I can keep the paging over here. Maybe I don't want system view up at all, so I'll just close that. And so now I've got my drawings, I've got my active signals, I've got my paging. Maybe I want this kind of a setup. But all of this is very sizable. You can move things around, size things. So very Windows centric, and similar to what you would expect in a Windows application. Then one item I didn't have open, what I did here is I went down to this menu down the bottom. That's where all of these things are located. I can view history, so that's another tab. So it just opens up as a tab again. I can move it somewhere else if I want to keep it open, or I can just leave it right here. But again, it has everything that's been going on in the system, and you see that user entry I made, sent personnel to investigate, that's there, as well as all of the events that I had been sending in. Are all located here. And then there's a number of filters. You can export this. You can just go ahead and export it to a CSV file and do your own filtering, sorting, and reporting and all that. We also have the capability to do a print. So if you hit print, it'll actually, I think we give a little preview too, it'll do a printout of your history. It starts with kind of a summary of everything that's going on in the system, and then kind of almost like the old style printer format, right? It just kind of shows you every event and everything that we have in our system. It starts printing it out. But you can filter it before you do any of these things too. So if we just wanted to filter it by, what's going on here, let's just say in the last hour, then it's just these events, and then you could just go ahead and print out those things. So number of ways to filter, even by category. You can say, well, I don't really want every event. I just want to see the alarms from the last hour. So then we just see those. It also gives you the alarms that return to normal. So a number of ways to play around with history. And then the last thing I'll show, at least in the user interface, is we have a number of reports that can be run. So we have a sensitivity report, a sensor runtime report, and a CO detector life remaining report. I've actually opened a couple of them up. They create in Word format. So a sensitivity report, actually all the reports look the same. When you hit sensitivity report, what it'll do is it'll open up another screen and list all of the panels. So if you have 100 panels, there'll be 100 panels listed here, and you just click on the panels that you want as part of the report, and you just say generate. And I'll bring one in because I ran that earlier today. So let me open this up. I'll go to the top here. So here's a runtime report, and what it'll do is give you a summary. So it'll list all of the panels, their serial numbers, their IP addresses, and we do an average runtime just for your knowledge. And then then what'll happen is for each panel, we'll run down every point. It'll have the point, the point label. In my case, I don't have very descriptive labels, but it'll have the point label, the address, the device type, and its runtime. And then for each SLC loop, it actually gives you an average runtime on that loop. So again, it's really for your information. We don't really make any recommendations in here, or about what you should do, or if 1 year and 15 days is too many or too few to be running it. So we just want you to understand the age, and this way you can communicate to a customer, particularly if you're starting to have trouble in the system. Maybe certain points are starting to go into alarm or getting troubles. Maybe you could show them that, hey, that point's been in here for 10 years. Maybe it's time to change that device, or maybe it just needs to be cleaned, what have you. So another one I'll show will be let's see which one this one is. Another one that I ran earlier. Let me zoom in on it a little bit here. Okay, so there's a sensitivity report. This is a really nice report too. So it'll take all your photo devices. So similar in style for each panel. We only have one panel right now. It'll go through and look at all the sensitivity for all the photo type devices. And at the beginning, it just gives you a summary of what you have. So we have 15 total points, broken up by some photos, some photo heats, some ducts. So a number of devices here. And then if we also summarize if there's an alert or an NFPA non-compliance, meaning we're seeing these as dirty in some way. And then if there'd be a report under alerts, there'd be a report of every point and which ones are dirty and need to be addressed. But then down below, for every point in the system, we list every point in the system. We list all of its sensitivity settings, and then its drift limits and its actual drift at the moment, and then let you know if it's compliant or non-compliant. But just a nice way to get your sensitivity information for all of your panels. And then the one final one is go to the top here. Oops. This is a CO life remaining report. So this is a nice one. So if you do have some of our CO devices, those do have a fixed life. Again, similar report for each panel. Then it kind of tells you for the, if there's for that month, if there's any that are upcoming end of life before September of 2022. And then we go through every device. We give you the runtime and how much more time there is until it needs to be replaced. So we do that for every CO device on the system. So a couple of nice things in PotterNet, even from a maintenance perspective. So now I'm going to go, and that's the basics of the PotterNet monitoring and a number of things you can do. And not to make it too confusing, because, in most cases, what you end up seeing is on a day-to-day basis is really the drawings and the active signals. That's the key to really monitoring the system. And these other things are just add-ons and capabilities that, make it just a nicer product. So now let me go ahead and show you where we do this configuration. It's all built into the system. It's called Studio. So I open up Studio, and this is where you import all your graphics. You do your drag and drop of all your devices. You create new screens. All of those things are done here, and I'll try not to dig too deep, but at least give you a feel for it. So over on the left-hand side here is a list of all my panels. So right now I just have this one panel. I can open up that screen a little bit more. I just have one panel, but if I wanted to add another panel, I just hit this plus sign and I hit add panels. And as I was describing to you earlier, when you go ahead and add a panel, the basics that you need the user code, which is programmed into the panel with your Potter programming tool. So it's usually like a 2 to 6 digit number that you put in there. So let's call it a password essentially. And then the IP address of that panel. Once you give us the user code and IP address, what we do is we go out with PotterNet and grab all the points from that panel and import them into Studio so that you can put those points on screens. So it's really that easy to get a panel up and running. I mean, really within minutes, you've got the panel connected, all the points imported, and then certainly there's a fair amount of time spent, dragging and dropping devices onto screens. Now, all that being said, you can run PotterNet without any graphics at all. Like you could close down that graphic screen that I was showing and just use it as a, I'll call it like a text reporting. And if you're familiar with like our FMT, sort of like our FMT, where you don't get graphics, but you do get all the events coming in, they're color coded, but you just don't have graphic maps. And that might be really fine for a smaller facility that maybe they know what the floor plan is, they don't need that, and then the setup time is certainly reduced quite a bit if you're not doing any graphics. So that's what that is. And then the audio servers is exactly the same thing. I was telling you we use those cyber data devices. If I really wanted to add another one, I added one earlier. I could it just says add audio device. I give it a name, an IP address, and the SIP audio port that we use is typically 5060, but that can be changed. And that's specific to the SIP device. I call it a SIP device. That cyber data SIP adapter is what we use. So it's really, again, everything is very IP based on this, and as long as we can get an IP address for things, we can connect. So that's how you add more of those cyber data devices so you can page the West Campus or the North Campus. And then down the bottom here is the screens, where this is where you create your campus. So I had that campus screen, which is, I had my site screen, which was the head screen, and then I have a campus screen, and then I had a random building, and then this was that second floor where all those devices we sent into alarm. So let me go through and let's just say we wanted to add a new screen. We're like, okay, well, that's that screen. If we want to add a new screen, essentially what you do is you just go, like, I'm going to add it to the campus and say, you just hit plus and it wants a drawing name and you just call it new, and it's going to create a new screen and take it to that, and it's blank. So you might want a background image on that, and so you just say set the image. Hopefully it'll take me somewhere where I can grab something. I don't know what this one is. I'm just going to grab this one. Okay, it's the same one I used on the other screen. That's okay. It's that easy where you just go ahead and grab that DXF file or PNG file or what have you, and it brings it in, and then you can essentially start dragging and dropping. So like this Academy panel, I can open it up, and I'm going to go, it doesn't really matter. I'll open up this built-in SLC, and I can just grab that point. It looks at the device type, gives you a default graphic, and you can start dragging and dropping those devices on the screen. You can resize them, and if you prefer, if you don't like our graphics, you could even change the icon image. I'm not going to do that now, but we have default images, which are obviously Potter based. But if you had some other image you really like to use, that's fine too. But that's what it is. It's more of a drag and drop, and you keep placing these devices, where they go in the system. And things that you might end up changing, I can see changing graphics when we're showing you modules, right? It may turn out that that's a door contact, and you'd rather have a door contact. That's when you would probably come over here and then just look at some of the graphics that we have, like this door holder, and then you can bring it in as a door holder. It doesn't really matter to the program what the graphic is, but your users might prefer the graphic be representative of what's going on. So that's the process of getting a system set up. And then when you save all this, that's what I was saying earlier, how it will replicate across all of your PotterNets. So you make this change, and then all your PotterNets get updated with these changes. So you don't have to do it once, and you don't have to do any copy and pasting. It's just done once and replicated. So that's a lion's share of what's going on in there. And then the whole user interface is made to be fairly simple. You can have different users. I'm just the admin right now, and every system has an admin. Then you can't delete that person. But then you could add, and I have the capabilities to do everything, but I can add, other people, right? So I can add like a guard, and that person gets a password. And let me just confirm it. Right, and then that guard gets added. They have no capabilities, but there might be things I do and don't want them to do, right? So I said that you can, let's just say, for instance, I want them to be able to locally acknowledge and panel acknowledge and silence, but I don't really want them resetting panels or maybe even doing a drill, but they can do disable, enable, and I even want them to do paging. But I might not want them doing a bunch of other things like changing the layout of screens or kind of coming into Studio and making changes. So, you can stop them from doing that, or you don't really want them to ever exit PotterNet. PotterNet's typically a program that's running 24/7 because it's monitoring a life safety system. So you don't want people shutting it down. So you can eliminate people from shutting it down. So anyway, lots of capabilities there in terms of controlling who does what. And then even in your history will show who did what on a system. So even when an alarm comes in, it shows who was logged in when that alarm came in. So you know that that person should have seen it and should have responded to it. Audio recordings, again, this is where you would add more audio recordings. You can get these recordings. You can create your own or bring in recordings, and you can get them to repeat and play forever. So if you said, hey, when there's a severe weather alert, we want it to play forever. And what it'll do is it'll just play and then repeat, and you can put a delay between the repeating. So if you want it to be a little bit of a pause between, you can do that. But at least it just continues to play until you tell it to stop. And then on the monitoring, not to get too detailed, but you can set up systems where, I think I said earlier, if it was say a maintenance office, they might not want to see all the alarms and stuff, but maybe they want to see the troubles. So ECS troubles or regular troubles, they want to see those, but they don't want to see the alarms. And actually, one application we had was where we had a fire station where they put one of these in a fire station, and they were the opposite. They didn't want to see the troubles. They did want to see the alarms because those are the things that they were responding to. So they said, we just want to see alarms. And actually, that's why this feature was added, was for them. And then we do also do ECS. So fire could be higher priority, or ECS could be higher priority, depending on the system and your AHJ's recommendation. So that's all of it. And when you're done, you hit save and exit. I'm going to discard my changes at the moment. Oh no, I'll go ahead and I'll do a save and exit. You'll see that new screen I added, and it'll basically will reboot the PotterNet and load the new information. So I should have that new site in here. Yeah, this was the new. So that was that new one that I added, and there's the graphics. And so, if those points come in, they will respond appropriately. So that's essentially the PotterNet and a lot of the capabilities of what it does. There's a few other things to show, but that's essentially it. The one thing I didn't show, but I'll reiterate again, when you buy PotterNet, you do get IntelliView, but I just want you to remember that when you do buy the PotterNet, the IntelliView comes with it. You don't have to purchase it separately, and essentially that means you get a mobile app and a web interface into your system, which is really nice.